the Muslims sealed the gate in an attempt to thwart Jewish prophecy that a returning Messiah or Savior would enter the city through the Golden Gate. For good measure, they placed a cemetery just outside the gate, in the belief that the Jewish Messiah would be a high priest and therefore forbidden by Jewish law to enter a cemetery, as he would become defiled and unable to perform his priestly duties. Some Orthodox Jewish leaders dispute this, claiming the Messiah will be a descendant of King David and not a high priest. The Messiah could therefore travel through a cemetery without violating any laws. Many Christians join in this prophecy about the importance of the gate, agreeing that it will be an entrance for a Messiah. However, they believe that the true Messiah came nearly 2,000 years ago in the form of an itinerant Jewish preacher named Jesus of Nazareth. They now expect their Christ or Messiah, Jesus, to return to Jerusalem as a final act, re-entering the city through the Golden Gate. All three religious groups expect dramatic and spectacular occurrences during these end-time events. Jewish people and Muslims alike expect these final happenings to concentrate on the nearby Mount of Olives and in the Kidron Valley that spreads out in front of the Golden Gate. Christians find in the New Testament book of Luke that Jesus Christ fulfills most of the messianic prophecies of the Old Testament. The Old Testament speaks of two appearances of the Messiah, the first as a lamb and the second as a lion. When he returns as the lion, in that day he will wrap up history as we know it. In the New Testament Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is quoted as saying that the Messiah's return will be as the lightning comes from the east and flashes even to the west. So shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Matthew's portrayal of the last days is strangely similar to the predictions of the end time in the Old Testament book of Zechariah. That prophecy calls for the Jewish Messiah to stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives will be split in its middle from east to west by a very large valley, so that half of the mountain will move toward the north and the other half toward the south. One of the most marvelous events in the end-time prophecies of the Old Testament calls for the pious dead of the earth to rise from their graves when the Jewish Messiah returns. Orthodox Jewish believers expect their Messiah to blow a ram's horn to call forth the dead. The Jewish faithful who are waiting for their Messiah believe that when he comes, he will lead the reconstruction of a Jewish empire and will initiate the building of the third temple on the old Temple Mount. There is argument about the promised Jewish empire, with some Israelis believing the current nation of Israel fulfills that promise. Others think there is an even more glorious state to come. All these end-time events would provide a spectacular closing scene for Earth's human drama. But all the ancient prophecies could put the diverse religious believers of Jerusalem on a spiritual collision course. Many of the most strongly held beliefs and prejudices of the old city's faithful would obviously come into direct conflict during the events leading up to the Day of Judgment. The biggest clash of these final days could actually begin at the most sacred of Jerusalem's holy sites, the Temple Mount. In 1967, when Israel captured the old city and the Temple Mount, it tried to preserve peace by allowing Muslims to administer the sacred site. Muslim leaders reacted strongly, forbidding any Jew or Christian from praying openly on the holy ground. They also refused to permit the building of any synagogues or churches anywhere inside the temple complex. Any hint of rebuilding the old Jewish temple is considered an outrage by Muslims, and many of the more zealous have sworn to defend the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque to the last drop of their blood. Yet Jewish tradition holds that God has irrevocably commanded that a new temple be built. The Jerusalem Talmud says Jews may even build a temporary temple before the Messianic era begins. In fact, a group of Jerusalem residents are working out plans for the Third Temple even today. Each day, Jewish faithful at the Western Wall pray the popular prayer, "May it be thy will that the temple be speedily rebuilt in our days." And each day, Muslim faithful become more and more dedicated to keeping their holy sites on the Temple Mount intact. Of the 8 gates surrounding Old Jerusalem, the Golden Gate is being watched continuously by Christians, Muslims, and the Jewish faithful. For the Jewish faithful, the Golden Gate symbolizes the entry for the Messiah and the beginning of a Messianic age. For the Christians, this gate promises the second coming of Jesus, their Savior. For Muslims, the Golden Gate will someday be part of the Last Judgment at the end of history. And so, like strands of rope which intertwine without ever really joining, this is a city interwoven with the dreams, hopes, and the desires of the 3 great Western religions. Here, the very act of living is a sacrament. The feat of surviving against all odds for thousands of years is the miracle. And the stones and gates provide mute testimony to the difficulty of just keeping one's faith alive in this holiest of lands. When these gates are open, they represent reception, tolerance, and inclusion. They are the meeting point of men of different races, religions, and beliefs. When the gates are or have been closed, they represent exclusion, intolerance, and fear. Men of different races, religions, and beliefs are censored, exiled, or slaughtered. The lesson to be learned is a difficult one. Like the human mind, the 8 gates of Jerusalem are strongest, as they are today, when they are open. If there is hope to be found in these gates, it is that they will always remain open to those who come seeking peace. These are the doorways to the one city on earth which celebrates our relationship with God. All have come from the same Creator, and all will return the same way. They have built this house together. The challenge is to enter it with grace, respect, and tolerance, and then to leave it undamaged for those who follow. Then, and only then, will the gates of time be the gates to the city of peace.